We are coming up on our second tough slate in a row for very different reasons, with the Jaguars heading to New Orleans to take on the Saints as 1 point underdogs with a total of 39.5. This is Showdown coverage brought to you by sharpfootballanalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, and before we head over to DraftKings, I want to remind you about promo code ANGLES. Head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Use promo code ANGLES to get 15% off your subscription. Let's head over to DraftKings. We've got Alvin Kamara there at the top at 10,400. It's nice to see him back. He's got some incredible usage. Actually, we've got two backs with some of the best usage in the NFL. Both backs are eclipsing 80% of the snaps for their offenses, and they've both been priced as such. One of the reasons this slate is so difficult. Last week was a difficult slate because all of the players with projectable volume were also very expensive. This slate very different. All of the players have projectable volume, and they're fairly cheap. Like, you don't really even need punt plays on this slate. There's so much projectable volume. We've got like 11 players last time I checked that are projected over 10 points. If you bring that down to 9, you've got like 13 players when you include the kickers. So this is a slate where you can do pretty much whatever you want. Doesn't always bode well, but if you're in those 20 max and those 150 max tournaments, that's kind of what you like. You can sprinkle in a lot of everything. If you go over to your projection sites and you start optimizing, you're going to see a ton of lineups that are 4x2 Saints. You're going to see a ton of them that are 4x2 Jags. Somebody like myself that looks early in the week to get a feel for the slate, that's a little uncomfortable because you don't have that guiding hand to tell you, okay, these are the types of builds I want to focus on. So you can do pretty much whatever you want this week in terms of which team you want to stack around. I do feel like both teams have similar floors, but the Jaguars have a significantly higher ceiling. But you'll hear in a minute that's going to get muddied by Derek Carr's price. So that brings you down to Travis Etienne, who's been a focal point of the Jaguars offense, but he's been getting it done in the scoring category. So his 10,000 or touchdown category, his $10,200 price tag has been boosted up by scoring a bunch of touchdowns. That doesn't mean that he's going to stop scoring touchdowns. We make that mistake a lot by going away from a guy just because of a lot of his production has been from scoring. Maybe he's just very good at scoring touchdowns, which Travis Etienne has proven to be over time. So not going to shy away from him at 10,200. It's just going to be he's probably going to have a lower roster percentage, he and Kamara, than you would typically see, just because there are so many players in that like $9,000 to $8,000 range that have similar ceilings. So you get down to Trevor Lawrence, who's going to be the first, hiccup in preparing for this game because he is questionable. Everyone's projecting him to be in at this point, but he is dealing with the injury. He hasn't looked exactly right over the past couple games. So pay attention to the news, but with so many players projecting to do well priced around him, I could see not feeling the need to necessarily include him. I will say in a total that's only 39.5, you would think that it's you'd be less likely to want to include a quarterback, but it's actually a little bit easier to get a quarterback into your captain spot, the low scoring game. But the weird thing is that, like I mentioned earlier, with the score being so low, the fact that so many players are projected over 10 points, it's just a weird game. It almost makes you feel like you want to go into preparation for this game as, I'm just going to pretend it's a 50-point over under. Because if you build your lineups like a 50-point over under, not to mention when everybody sees an over under that's under 40, the defense's roster percentage is just egregious. I almost just want to shy away from the defense when the total is so low, because we're going to see 25-30% for the defense, especially so that we can fit in more of these $8,000, $9,000 guys. I think that you might want to just pretend that this game's total was a little bit higher, given the how weird it is that these players are projected so high. Bring us down to Chris Olave at 9,000, way too low for his involvement. His snap share, his target share is one of the better in the league, one of the more projectable players in the league. It's just that he's attached to Derek Carr, who's not been playing very good football since joining New Orleans, and is also dealing with multiple injuries. Definitely chest. I think maybe chest and shoulder is what he's working through. DraftKings has done a very good job at pricing quarterbacks this year. Like, you would almost want to just omit Carr you could almost go no quarterback and feel comfortable on the slate. And they, had the foresight to see that and put their Carr's price down to 8,800, which is lower than you'll really ever see a starting quarterback. You're not often going to see a legitimate starting quarterback priced under. And for example, CJ Beathard, 8,600, and that is just with the potential that Trevor Lawrence could miss the game. So Derek Carr being priced so low, almost as you can see, like a backup. Another thing DraftKings has done well this year is there's no longer $6,000 backups. They've tried very hard to foresee quarterback injuries, and if there's even an inkling that a quarterback could miss, they bump that price up. So Derek Carr's price keeps him plenty in play. And the fact that he's got Chris Olave, who's too cheap, and Michael Thomas, who's too cheap, makes him very appealing. You can even probably fit Alvin Kamara with those four, which we'll go look at in just a minute. So while I do think the Jaguars have the higher ceiling, it's nice to have Derek Carr at 8,800 for some salary relief, especially in a low total game. Derek Carr could probably get there just as well as Trevor Lawrence is, even though I understand that there is quite the disparity in the two's talent. Calvin Ridley at 8,400. He had a very, very incredible start with the Jaguars. A little bit of a down, called a touchdown in London against his former team. Probably doing better in real NFL than he is in fantasy. So he's probably getting catching a lot of strays that he probably hasn't earned. But in terms of what we care about, especially in a PPR site like DraftKings, Calvin Ridley hasn't been quite as involved as we would have expected after the first week, especially since he's $400 more than Christian Kirk, and Christian Kirk is likely going to earn a slightly larger target share. I mean, we're talking probably 25 and 24% between Kirk and Ridley, but making them both plenty viable, right? But the $400, I don't know, maybe it comes up. You probably would prefer to just play both of them with Lawrence. That's something that you're going to need to pay attention to tomorrow. I'm definitely leaving myself more open to Jaguar stacks. I want any reason I can to start heavily stacking the Jaguars. So if I get some good news about Trevor Lawrence, it sounds like he's doing okay, then we're going to lean towards those Jaguar stacks in which Ridley and Kirk would fit fantastic with Trevor Lawrence. Talked about Michael Thomas just a little bit. Think about how nice it is just to see Michael Thomas back. I guess not everybody's a fan of his, but it was just kind of crazy to see him leading the league in receptions, actually breaking the receptions record, and then just the fall from grace, injury, problems with the teams, things like that. Getting the surgery, not getting the surgery, and now he's playing very productive football. 7,000 is good for his target share as well. So Chris Olave is like, I'm definitely paying the 2,000 to get to Chris Olave over Michael Thomas. But if you do need a Saints run back, Michael Thomas has the guaranteed volume, a reasonable price. His roster percentage isn't going to get too out of hand because he's not underpriced. He's not overpriced. It's just a very fair price for Michael Thomas's involvement thus far in the year. Makes him a pretty nice run back if you do get to those Jaguar stacks, especially since the Jaguar side of the ball with Zay Jones out, who we'll talk about in just a moment. Jaguars have a little bit more salary relief that we can discuss as opposed to New Orleans, who they don't really have much in the way of punt options. I guess Kendre Miller we can talk about in a moment, but not someone I'm super comfortable playing with in like small field stuff. Evan Ingram down here at 5,800 is probably the only mispriced Jaguar. I would prefer to play Evan Ingram than Calvin Ridley in pretty much every lineup. I know that means Calvin Ridley's going off for 100 and a touchdown, but Evan Ingram at 5,800, given his usage and his snap share so far this season, is something that I don't really understand. And he's one of the reasons that you don't necessarily have to punt. And in fact, Evan Ingram could probably find himself as a viable captain, as something like a 5% rostered captain at 5,400 or 5,800. Jake Ferguson last week had a good bit of good roster share at captain himself at a similar price, and his role is not nearly as viable as Evan Ingram. So that's just a little callback that goes to show you that Evan Ingram's price is just not it's not accurate. Raheed. I'm not gonna get it right. We're gonna go with Shaheed. Shaheed's 5,000 is a little bit high. You see the fantasy point per game. DraftKings cares a ton about that. So that's why he's going to get that pricing. But he's going to be up and down. His definitely playing fourth fiddle to Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Chris Olave. At 5,000, he's still going to get some run. He's still going to pop in some of the optimizers, but I'm looking for ways to not stack Derek Carr at 8,800, and that's one of them. I mean, if I have to pay $5,000 for Shaheed to get to a third receiver to go with Derek Carr, then it's probably a good reason to try to go in the way of the Jags, which again is entirely dependent on the health of Trevor Lawrence. Jaguars at 3,800 is too cheap for a game with this total, which is another reason that I'm probably not going to have much exposure to them because, like I said in the opener, the defense's roster percentage just skyrockets when there's a total under 40. It's almost going to be 25, 30, 40%, and their price is too low. So if you're going to go with one of the defenses, I'd say go with the Jaguars. I think they're the better defense anyways. I guess I would have to check back at some of the metrics we care about, but 5,400 is a lot for the Saints, and that's because Trevor Lawrence could miss the game, of course, and obviously if Trevor Lawrence misses the game, then people are going to pay the 5,400 for the Saints. As you get lower, the really the only players that we care about this low, you don't really need to punt given the pricing of this slate. But if you wanted to, for the Saints, Kendre Miller at 1,800 is going to get a good bit of roster share, but he's going to get like 2 targets, 4 carries, something like that. So he'll be okay, but at 20% snap share, I mean, Alvin Kamara is playing 80% of the snaps. He's getting a ton of looks from Derek Carr, who was used to throwing to Josh Jacobs last year, and they've pretty much picked up with that same rapport that he had with Jacobs. So I just don't see a ton there for Kendre Miller. The ceiling's just super low for him. I mean, he'd have to score a touchdown, which is what, a 3% chance or something like that. Not super likely, but Jamal Agnew with Zay Jones out, you're going to have a few guys filling in. Jamal Agnew's snap share was 36% last week with Zay Jones out. But the thing about Jamal Agnew is that he had design touches for him anyways prior to Zay Jones being injured. So it's a lot easier for the Jaguars to get him involved because he's already integrated in the offense. I mean, you could have Tim Jones get a catch or two that makes him someone that's maybe worth considering. But Jamal Agnew at 400 is an excellent reason to want to stack the Jaguars because if you throw Jamal Agnew in, you can pretty much play whoever you want since Agnew's min priced, and you're pretty on most slates you're guaranteed a touch from Jamal Agnew. So with Zay Jones out, you can probably project him for 3-ish touches. And 3 touches for a guy who's obviously a very good kick returner, punt returner is that could go a long way, especially in your large field tournaments. I mean, he's not going to fly under the radar by any means. He'll be reasonably rostered, but he does do a lot in the way of saving salary for your lineups. Let's go build some lineups. Some of the things that we wanted to talk about were how many of the Jaguars could you fit in the flex? I guess you're not really going to want to start with Trevor Lawrence as captain. I'd actually rather go with Christian Kirk at captain. Immediately when I first looked at this slate, he was the first thing that popped out to me as captain viable. His price is just way too low given how much he's produced. I really don't understand why he's not like 86, 88, something like that. But either way, we're happy about it. Let's try to fit ETN, Lawrence, and who else did we? Oh, Evan Ingram. Okay, this is the start that I really wanted to go with, and I wanted to see where I could go from here. Michael Thomas at 7,000 leaves 5,400. A lot you can do with that. You do have a little bit of a drop off there. You get to the Saints, which, like, of course, you could play the Saints with Trevor Lawrence, and that could work out. And that's I always point out things that are typically rules. I feel like people make more rules than they really should on Showdown, just given how viable that they are. So a lot of people are going to click the button that says omit the opposing defense to my quarterback. So sure, you go with Saints, but you're going to leave no salary on the table, and the Saints are not going to be they're going to be rostered heavily anyways. I would prefer to go with one of the kickers here, probably the Saints kicker. So that leaves 200 on the table. You'd have Christian Kirk at captain, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, Evan Ingram, Michael Thomas, and Blake Group. But that's a lot of receivers to pair with your receiver captain. So something you might want to do here is probably swap Etienne at captain. We're going to have to play Agnew in this lineup, though, because Etienne's quite expensive. Let's throw Etienne at captain. We'll keep Evan Ingram in there. We can throw because we do want to get Christian Kirk back. So let's throw Christian Kirk back in there. 4,300. If you go down from there, you can get your Agnew in. Throw Agnew in there. You've got 3,900 to go up. You can do a lot here. What I would probably do is go up from Evan Ingram, and then you can play like Chris Olave would be fantastic. In a slate where there's so many players projected over 10 points, I'm pretty comfortable playing like Olave and Thomas given their volume and omitting Carr. Like it's a lot easier to get there for Olave and Thomas than it's going to be for Derek Carr. It seems as though he's been fighting a uphill battle. But of course, you could throw Carr in here, make for a pretty viable lineup. Travis Etienne, captain, Christian Kirk, Trevor Lawrence, Derek Carr, Michael Thomas, Jamal Agnew. Perfectly fine with that lineup. I'm also fine with Chris Olave, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Trevor Lawrence, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Jamal Agnew. Totally fine with those two. And then let's go ahead and build a Saints lineup since we have the time, because Kamara at captain is if I can fit Kamara and Etienne and almost want to go a no quarterback build and see how it works out, because a lot of people don't like to build lineups with no quarterbacks, but with a low total, it could definitely be viable. And I definitely wanted to see what a lineup would look like with Kamara and Etienne. So we can throw in Christian Kirk, we can throw in Evan Ingram. You probably are going to want a kicker in this build. Let's go with McManus and see what that leaves us with. 5,600. But I don't want to go with the Saints here. You don't really want to go with Shaheed. You could try your Jamal Agnew and then get another expensive player in here. That's going to leave a lot of money out there. You could just throw a quarterback in here, actually. That's totally fine too. And 1x5s don't work out a ton, but they do work out. I see them enough to warrant consideration. So Alvin Kamara at captain, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Jamal Agnew, Trevor Lawrence might be one of my favorite builds that I've built so far. It's going to be super unique. Like 5x1s are already unique, but with your one at the captain, you're pretty safe to not get duplicated. And these are all players that I feel super comfortable with. So with all that being said, that's going to do it for Showdown coverage brought to you by sharpfootballanalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde. Make sure you use promo code ANGLES at sharpfootballanalysis.com, and I will catch you next week. Peace.